Good to go? Alright, so when was the last time any of you went to Chipotle? Maybe you were feeling it that day, you ordered the guac, you know, it's extra, it's kind of a big deal. But then you notice you go home and you have explosive diarrhea. That's not fun, is it? Well, in mid-2015, over 500 people had this happen to them. So today we're going to be talking about the Chipotle food crisis. Now we're going to be answering three basic questions. What happened? What were the consequences, and what did they do to fix it? As someone who goes to Chipotle all the time, I'm a big Chipotle fan, I'm quite familiar with the way that they prepare their food, and I can kind of understand a little bit better as to how their food chain issues happened, and I just kind of feel like I'm fairly informed on the situation. Alright, so we're going to start off with the question of what exactly happened. So you may kind of know Chipotle screwed up, but you may not know exactly what they did. Basically, the first thing that happened, we're going to go to an article written by Susan Fairfield in Bloomberg on December 21st, 2015. It states that 53 people in 9 different states were affected by the same strand of E. coli. So this means that it's a supply chain issue. If you have 9 different states, what all these restaurants have in common is their food chain. So basically, they rooted it back to the cheese, which I don't know, it's kind of weird. The cheese was the issue. Okay, and then the second thing that happened, you may think that they just had like this one issue with the cheese. Well, no, they actually had 3 separate different issues. The next one was in Minnesota, 45 restaurants were affected by a salmonella outbreak. Salmonella is a pretty big deal, and 45 restaurants is a pretty big number. So this is huge. This has huge PR consequences. And yet again, this is rooted back to the tomatoes, which is another supply chain issue. Now, something you need to know about Chipotle is they have this motto of never frozen, always fresh food. So basically, their business model is what was affecting them in such a negative way. The way that they did their food is the reason that it was having these issues. Now, they had a third PR stunt problem, and this was in Boston. This was a neurovirus. An employee came to work sick and got a whole bunch of people who came to eat at Chipotle sick. And that, I don't know, that's just, I don't know who this guy's boss was, and I don't know exactly what he was thinking and how he was going to get away with this, but yeah, he got several people sick. So this is 3 majorly terrible headlines for Chipotle. So this is going to transition into our next point here, is what exactly was the consequences of Chipotle's actions? Well, obviously, they are a healthy brand, and what's bad, you know, sickness, health, sickness, it doesn't really quite work out. So they just have all these, they're having all these issues right here with, you know, the brand. It's just really bad for the brand. Now, one of the most physical manifestations of how well a company is doing is the stock market. In an article written by Market Watch, and then the specific author was Kathy Line, it was published on October 2016. Their stock actually fell 42% in 1 year. That's a substantial amount of money. That's almost half of their company value gone like that because of food chain issues and one employee who didn't know he was sick. Now, the other thing that happened was, in that same article, it was stated that in each restaurant, they dropped their volume from 2.5 million to 1.8 million. So they were selling $2.5 million worth of food every year in each restaurant. And then on average, it fell 1.8 million to 1.8 million. That's a pretty decent cut. I mean, that's quite a hit on your bottom line. Now, you may be wondering, what did Chipotle do to fix all these issues? They did a few things. Honestly, you really can't, when something that bad happens, you're kind of in trouble. But they did a very intense investigation into figuring out exactly what the supply chain issue was. Now, I told you that it was never frozen, always fresh food. Well, they kind of figured it out. So McDonald's freezes their food and puts it in a box. That food's not going to get contaminated. As long as the freezer doesn't break, that food's going to be fine. Now, with Chipotle's model, they were especially susceptible to different outbreaks of just anything could grow on their cheese while it was being transported. So they had to kind of compromise on their whole healthy thing, and they started pre-bagging the tomatoes and cheese. So that was basically their biggest step they had to take to actually solve a literal problem. Then they still had the PR issue. So their CEO came out, and I don't really know exactly how much good this does, but in an article written by National Restaurant News, he comes out and he basically says, our issues are done. Chipotle is a clean restaurant again. And you can take that with whatever, with a grain of salt, whatever you want to do with that. And then they started making a very aggressive ad campaign. So they bought up lots of magazine ads and bought up lots of TV time explaining exactly how they fixed their issue and how it's safe to come back to Chipotle. So if we're going to review here, the Chipotle, what went wrong? They experienced one of the worst food contamination outbreaks ever. The bread was tarnished, and they had to fix their problem with their food supply chains. Now, Chipotle did commit one of the worst food contamination breaches ever, but just my personal opinion here in closing thought, I would say they're probably going to be okay. I don't know, some of you were alive back then, but Jack in the Box actually killed a few kids back in the day. They had really, really bad burger safety, and they killed 4 kids. So, and they eventually overcame it. People forget about stuff. Tylenol had a big issue in the 90s and 80s. They actually killed some people too, but with time, wounds heal, and I think Chipotle will eventually be all right. And for you personally, I would say Chipotle is probably one of the safest restaurants to eat at in business now, as they've just gone through all the scrutiny.